Talktainment Radio Worldwide South. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
Live call-in talk show. Dial 1-877-932-9766 and join the conversation here on TalkTainmentRadio.com.
This is the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
All right. Hello, and how are you, wherever you are? Welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go on the world's greatest radio. You are now in touch with the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am the co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is radio the way it should be heard. You can join the conversation today, which is going to be on reflections. That topic came from one of our Gmailers, and we will get into that. But reflections is going to be there, and we're going to have Mr. Fuller develop the conversation around that. You can join the conversation by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com. You can listen to the program and hear it by going to the YouTube channel, just typing in Talktainment, and then typing in radio, then scroll down to Talktainment number 2, and you're there. Of course, you can also listen to us by going to the Talktainment.com radio homepage and just hit programs, listen live, and you're right there. Facebook is in the action, facebook.com/Talktainment. You can do that if you want to hear the program there. Okay, I think that's about it. Oh, yeah, and again, calling in 1-877-932-9766. Okay, don't forget, we need your donations for the second hour. We will be doing that until they tell me to not do that, but we do need that. Excuse me. Many have called in, and let me say this before we get started today, and I'm also saying this to Mr. Fuller. I have been receiving some phone calls and also some Gmails from people who are having problems receiving this program. Now, if you go to the TalkTainmentRadio.com homepage, you get the content of whatever we're talking about. Other mediums, there seems to be some problems. I have been told that Mr. Fuller's work or programs have been deleted, or there's some problems going on. I don't know about the other networks. This is what I do know. Okay, that the usual suspects are in play because Mr. Fuller's word of codification is effective, and the usual suspects do not want to get that out. What I am surprised about is the millennials now are listening to Mr. Fuller's word, and they want more information. So evidently the usual suspects are at play trying to disrupt or distort Mr. Fuller's work. But if you go to the TalkTainmentRadio.com homepage, you can get the work of Neely Fuller uninterrupted and all that. Yes, they have messed with phone lines, and whatever way they can break it up, they have done this and are doing this right now, even as we speak. So TalkTainmentradio.com is doing all it can to prevent that. But this is what's going on, and I have the Gmails to prove that something is going on. But anyway, be that as it may. We're going to talk about reflections today. We have a caller on the line. I usually like to introduce Mr. Fuller first, but I'll tell you what, I will take the call first, and then I will go through the usuals. Caller, you're first up. What is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I have an answer for him. You wanted to know why people want the old book rather than the new book. Is that one of the questions?
Okay.
Okay. Now, I have the old book. Actually, I got it as a gift a while ago, and I brought it with me to South Africa. And what I did was I bound it up. Okay. Now I just came back to the States right now for a few months, and first thing I did was buy the new book. Right. Now, when I look at them both, the old book, there's something about it. It's bigger. That's one thing, and it's just something about it. It's like having like a raw, the first edition of a Duke Ellington record. When he was early on rather than later. So I think there's something just about the aesthetics of the old one is much better. Okay. Now I do have. Is that understood?
Yeah. Well, for me, I don't know about Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, did you understand that?
Yes, I can hear him, and I can faintly hear you. There's a problem here on the line.
Okay, we're working with that one. Okay. He did. Is this Mr. Sloan from South Africa?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, brother. Yeah, thank you.
I'm in the States with it. Now, I have a, you talk about reflections, okay? Now, I have a thing that let me say this. I listen to Mr. Fuller I listen to your broadcast every week, okay? It's like church to me, It's like the preacher, the church, and I actually use the book like a Bible, like that. But y'all are, Mr. Fuller, I have to tell you this. I'm going to challenge you. You're driving me crazy with this. Okay, there's a thing that people used to say they say quote unquote. Now, logically, if you quote something, how are you going to unquote it right away? Now, there's many ways you can do this. You can say quote and then do the quote in a different voice and then keep going. You can say quote, do the quote, and then say end quote. There's little ways to do it. So my challenge to you, and you don't have to answer it right now, this is something you have to do. I need you to just look at that. Just look at that for a second. Remember, you're on radio, so what you can do, you can just alter your voice, or you can say end quote, or you can say close quote, but you choose. Now, the last thing is, this is a question. It's kind of interesting. They have this thing with the Supreme Court where they made corporations a person, right? How does that feed into what we're talking about in terms of the code? Because a corporation isn't a person, but somehow it is a person. I'm trying to figure out how do we apply your theories to fighting this if we want to fight it. You understand what does anybody understand what I'm asking? Is my question.
Mr. Fuller?
The question is, how do you fight?
Okay, no. What has happened? The Supreme Court has basically said that a corporation, they've been working on this for years. The corporation started this, with the 14th Amendment. They are now acknowledged as a person. So that a corporation has the same rights as a citizen of the United States. A corporation does. Now, of course, a corporation is not a person. We know that, but in law, it is. So how do we fight that, or how do we address that? By using your code to address that specific situation. Say, no, this can't be, you understand, if we was to fight this or bring this as a Supreme Court case or revisit it and something like that, well, this is why, because, how can this corporation deal with what we're dealing with? I'm asking, Mr. Bobby, can you help me with this question? I'm trying
to I don't know. You're basically saying that the Supreme Court has said that a corporation is a person now?
That's what they said.
Okay, and we're working with. So then you want to know how can the things that Mr. Fuller talks about in a codified way, how would that affect that? Is that what you're basically asking?
Yeah. How can we use the code? How can we use the compensatory concept to actually address that? How do we address that? Because obviously a corporation is not a person, but they say it's a person.
Okay, Mr. Fuller.
Oh, well, then the first question would be: is that a problem?
Oh, I think it's a problem. I don't know.
All right. Now, the answer is yes. That's a problem. Okay. So, what is the problem? That's the next logical question. According to the code, since we're talking about code here, codification, all problems are solved through the process of what? Questions and answers. So somebody is saying what something is not. So, in this particular case, it sounds like someone is saying that a corporation is not a person. Is that correct?
Well, I think the people say it's not, but the law, if you want to put it, the white.
What does the law say?
The law says it is a person.
Okay, the law says that a corporation is a person.
Yes.
Okay. So the logical process I would know. I hadn't thought about it too much, very much, or probably not at all. I've heard the expression. So then it comes down to, okay, a corporation is a person. So therefore, what does that person look like? How can that person be contacted? Will that person answer questions? Because it seems like we got a lot of questions here to be answered by whatever a corporation is. If it's a machine or a person or whatever, what is it? It's a person. So corporation is a person. Does that person have a voice? Does that person have reasoning power? Does that person make decisions? Since the corporation is a person, you probably have dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of questions there. First, before you even start talking about any details, get it straight about how do you address a problem to a corporation, regardless of what you call it, whether it's a person or a thing or a clock on the wall or what. Ascertain how, what is it for? What does a corporation do? How does it relate to me? So you can have maybe 200 or 300 questions before you get to what? A problem solved, because that's the whole purpose. Or you can raise that question. What is a corporation for? Is it to solve problems? And if so, is it to solve a problem that has anything to do with me? Or does it make a problem for me? And how can I keep that corporation from making a problem for me? Those are a series of questions. That's the codified manner. Just start asking questions. There's questions all over the place. I mean, this whole smorgasbord, a whole warehouse of questions. Just on getting it straight about what my interaction is supposed to be with a corporation. It's on the planet with me. And so I want to know, does a corporation have anything to do with me? Directly or indirectly? Anything. And if so, what? See, that's how you handle it. And whom do I talk to?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Thank you for addressing my concerns. And think about that thing when I said, if you're still learning, then that whole thing about quote, unquote, you don't have to answer it now. You should work on that. I listen every week, so I'm going to be monitoring you. You understand?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll talk to you another time.
So what is the procedure that should be used?
Well, the thing is, if you quote something, right?
Yes, sir.
Then you quote it, but you cannot unquote it. So you can say quote. So let me take one of your. Let me just look at this book and take one of your. Just a short thing. You might say, for instance, okay, injustice is a form of insanity. It's on page 405 in the new edition, right? So you would say, I would say, Mr. Neely Fuller says, quote, injustice is a form of insanity. That's all I would. Then that might change my voice. I think that's very good. Or whatever. Or I might say, Mr. Neely Fuller says, quote, injustice is a form of insanity. End quote. Or I might say, Mr. Fuller says, injustice is a form of insanity. End quote. You see, I give you other options. You can keep your quote unquote if you want, but now you got two or three other options to work with. Now, logically, you have to pick one of them that makes the most logical sense. Not only to you, because you're broadcast, you have to make the most logical sense to everybody in the world. You understand what I'm saying? No.
Really.
You don't have to answer my question. I'm saying think about this and just keep on thinking about it. And eventually, if it moves your spirit, then you will adopt it. If it doesn't, and you want to continue what you're doing, that's fine too. Because you're an adult, I'm an adult. You have the ability to say no. Okay?
No, I just want to do what is most efficient. So you're saying that if I make a quote, I will say the word quote, and then when I finish with the quote, I will say the word unquote.
No, I'm saying you cannot say unquote because you just quoted the quote. How can you unquote the quote you just quoted? logically, you cannot unquote a quote. You have to either say end quote, right, or close quote, or if you're like say broadcasting, you can change your voice for the quote and then not say anything and just continue to go.
I understand what you're saying because I've done that myself. But I understand what you're saying, Brother.
Okay, I don't want to take a lot of time. Y'all can figure it out other time, but I'm not asking for an answer right now. Figure it out time. Let me get off so other people have a chance to talk to you, right?
If it will improve communication, which is what I'm trying to do, then I'll work on that. But I have to first understand what's being said, and maybe Mr. Bobby can help give an illustration or something like that in our conversations and straighten me out on that.
Okay.
I have no problem with making an improvement in anything.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to do here. Okay. Thank you so very much.
Brother Sloan. Thank you, Brother
Sloan.
Sloan. Yeah, that's Brother Sloan. He contacts me. He's from South Africa, and he's in the country for a while. Since we're here, let me do this. TalkTameRadio.com is a 24/7 no-charge worldwide broadcasting facility with hosts delivering on various topics such as news and lifestyle, sports, law, health, wellness, religion, and politics. Now, here's a few that I'm going to share with you. It's Your Time to Travel with Ricky Tyus, a conversation with Don Carina, and, of course, New Money. Now, all of these particular shows are exclusive to TalkTameRadio.com. And all you have to do, if you would like, and we certainly would like for you to do this, is go to the TalkTameRadio.com homepage, click on programs, and there you will see a list of all the programs that Talktainment Radio has. Now, you owe it to yourself to at least sample one of these programs, or all of them, whichever you want to do that, to get a tender or get a feel for what the program is about. Maybe you will like it and maybe you won't like it, but you'll never know unless you sample it and give it a try. All that is from TalkTainmentRadio.com. That is radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby. I am the co-host on the Compensatory Concept with Neely Fuller Jr., which I have not properly introduced, but because we have another phone call, so I will go to the phone call, and maybe after the phone call, I'll get a chance to introduce Mr. Fuller. Okay, caller, you are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting the progress of the show, but just two requests for Mr. Fuller right quick. First request is for Mr. Fuller to explain the importance of asking questions in communication and not just trying to ask questions by making statements, but asking questions to get you where you have to go in the dialogue communication.
Okay, that's the first question. Is that correct?
Say it again, please.
That is the first question you're asking. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, let's give Mr. Fuller a chance to answer.
What was that question?
Okay, yeah, repeat that question, sir.
Please explain when in communication to always ask questions instead of just trying to ask questions by making statements expecting to get a response. Make sure you make your questions clear and precise, and to always ask questions in communication.
Mr. Fuller?
If I understand the question, do you always try to make your question precise? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And not just making statements. Yeah.
Yes. Stay away from statements. If you have a question, just have present a question, and just put a question mark behind it, the question, and then wait for the answer. And then don't start making statements after you ask the question until you get the question answered. That's the orderly procedure.
Yeah, don't help them with the answer.
And don't help a person with the answer. Mm-hmm. See, because the concept is you already have maybe an idea of what the answer should be, but it's not your question. You're not asking yourself the question. You're asking somebody else their answer to the question. Mm-hmm. So wait for that person's answer, And then if you don't understand the answer that they're giving you, then say that. You can make a statement then, and then ask them, like I do on the air. I would say, can you rephrase your question so that I can understand what the question really is? And then I'll try to come up with the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But I might already have my version of an answer, but I want the person's answer. That's why I asked that person. Otherwise, why ask the person a question when you have already come to the conclusion or the answer to that question yourself, and you're not going to change it, except maybe you just want to find out what their answer would be so that you can compare it with what your answer is, and you can make that clear.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what you have to say about this, because I've already concluded what I have to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that is the case. But you don't argue about the person's answer that they're giving you, because that is that person's answer.
Correct.
That's why you ask that person, give me your answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
I already have mine.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What is your second question, sir?
Explain the importance of remaining silent until you have something constructive to say, particularly like in workplaces. Generally, people expect you to always chit-chat, while you're there to work and do a job. That typically goes on in a workplace. Explain how the code is just be constructive in your speech.
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
Yes, sir. Constructive conversation. That's one thing that is woefully lacking all over the world, and particularly here in the Northwestern Hemisphere, and particularly among people of color, particularly people who are classified as black. Constructive conversation is woefully, painfully lacking all day long. You hear conversations or arguments mostly, and you try to say, now, what is constructive about this? What am I listening to here on this bus? And there's someone on a phone back on the bus talking to the top of their voice, screaming, yelling. And is this constructive conversation? In other words, constructive conversation means when that conversation or that talk, you can't sometimes call it conversation, sounds like an argument all the time, an argument. We should never have arguments. We should always have conversations. Conversations are designed to come to a conclusion that's going to solve a problem in the best possible manner. An argument is just designed to win an argument, or to generate another argument that's designed to win an argument. So it just goes on and on and on, and it escalates hostility. That's what an argument does. It brings on greater and greater and greater hostility. And from the hostility comes conflict, greater verbal conflict, meaning the conversation gets to be name-calling and accusations and counter-accusations. Next thing you know, that leads to what? A fight.
Yeah, fight.
And what does the fight lead to? It leads to killing, which black people have plenty of. But if we had constructive contact, we would just make sure anything that I say is going to have a constructive result. Otherwise, I'm not saying it.
Yes, sir.
And the way you avoid non-constructive conflict, and most conflicts are non-constructive, is you don't engage in anything but constructive contact. And usually you do that through words. So if you don't have anything constructive to say, try to do your best not to say anything at all. Silence. Black people in the Northwestern Hemisphere need tons and tons and tons and tons of absolute silence. Nobody's saying anything, period. We're not very, you might say, to use the word good, we're not very good at it. We're not very good at it at all, at all, at all. It's just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
If you just, we make eye contact. All of our contacts are just loaded with hostility because we are very poisonous people. The system of racism has just loaded all of us up with poison.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't look at each other without, hey, we want to get something on. What do we mean by that? Conflict. And when the words come behind it, what you looking at me for? Or in the grocery line. I mean, you know, you can almost feel the tension as the baskets begin to form between people and whatnot. And if anybody makes eye contact, you got to watch out. Is this going to be a gunfight situation? I mean, you can almost feel it coming. You can feel it coming. We have this thing. This is why for years I said when black people see each other coming, they should go the other way. I mean, I'm talking about 2 blocks away so that their paths don't even cross. So that they don't even get in contact, don't even get close enough to each other to talk. Well, when I first started saying that back in the 1990s, people would laugh, but at the same time, it was nervous laughter because many people said, that's kind of true of us. I mean, even when we spot each other 2 blocks away, we start forming opinions and getting it in our mind that if we come anywhere close to each other, we're supposed to get our fist balled up.
Yes, I've heard that where somebody said, what you looking at? Or maybe they use a cuss word, you know.
People die from it.
Yes,
We've had circumstances right here in Washington recently. A couple of years ago, a young fellow was getting on the subway.
Mm-hmm.
No, he was passing by a bus stop, and another young black male was standing there with his grandmother. And he said, what you looking at me for? You don't know me. What you keep looking over here for? You got something for me? You got something for me? And then he pulled out his gun and killed the guy.
Mm.
And the boy wasn't even looking at him. The boy was looking at something down the street that his grandmother was trying to point out. Looking past him.
Mm-hmm.
But he died right there at the bus stop. That type of thing. I mean, we are loaded with poison. We are just loaded with it. You can feel it walking up on a bus stop. And already there's 5 or 6 black people huddled together there. You can almost feel it. Hey, I need to walk past this bus stop. I don't even need to stand here with us. Because something ugly is going to happen. Somebody's going to say something ugly. And then that's going to add to some more ugliness. And the next thing you know, you got a small riot between 5 and 6 people on a bus stop.
Over a look.
Whereas if they didn't come in contact with each other at all, which is real healthy for black people. See, in other words, I've often said, hey, the black person who is about to explode and whatnot, just transfer that black person from what we call the ghetto to where he or she is surrounded by nothing but white folks. Just a whole bunch of white faces. Little old white ladies pushing a shopping cart. White people walking their dogs. I mean, that black person becomes more thoughtful, more considerate, and quieter.
Before we go to the Gmails, Mr. Fuller, the first call from Mr. Sloan from South Africa, who is visiting the United States here. When he was speaking about quotations, if I may, let me give an example. You use some quotations by Mark Twain a lot, whichever ones you decide to use. I believe what he was saying is when you do that, when you quote him, and you come to the end of it, instead of saying close quote, because technically you can't close a quote which has already been quoted, but he was saying or suggesting that you may want to say end of quote, which still leaves the quote intact, and then you go on to whatever else the question may be. Is that does that get you to kind of understand what Mr. Sloan was saying, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, but your voice is coming and going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yes, but can you give me an illustration? Say, I sometimes quote Mark Twain. I say, I was proud to be able to answer promptly, and I did. I said I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is a quote from Mark Twain.
Okay.
Now, how would I say that in a way that would be better understood by people listening?
Okay. He would say, go ahead and say the quote, and then at the very end of it, and instead of saying close quote, say, for example, end of quote.
Oh, well, I didn't remember even saying close quote.
Well, I didn't either, but evidently he did. He's just making a suggestion.
Oh.
That's all.
Rather than say close quote.
Yeah, just say end of quote.
Change the words and say end of quote.
You could do that, yes. That's all he was saying, or whatever.
Okay, so the way I would say that, say, for example, Mark Twain said, quote, I was proud to be able to answer promptly, and I did. I said I didn't know. End of quote.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly.
I didn't know that I even used end of quote.
Well,
usually I don't think I even said anything at the end of the quote.
Maybe you did, maybe you didn't.
And maybe I should have.
Yeah, could be. It was just a suggestion.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah, it was just a suggestion. That to me...
And I can see where that might be confusing to somebody, because then I would continue to go on and talk about something else.
Exactly.
And it wouldn't be a part of the quote.
It would not be part of the quote, like the one you did.
Oh, I see.
Like the one you did last week. I told you that I loved you, now get out. Now, for me, that is funny. That is funny. But if you didn't end it, it could go on adding things to it that wasn't in there. But to me, just because you said that it was I guess a song title or something, I told you that I loved you, now get out. I don't know why that is so funny to me, but that's the end of it, or at least as far as...
Well, I was just making an illustration so that people can understand about this word love.
Yes.
How it's just, people throw that word around just like it's, it means this and it means that, and it means nothing. I mean, and so it's gotten to a place that doesn't mean anything.
Yes.
I mean, black people talk about love. I mean, boy, we load up with love when we talk about it. But where is it?
Okay. Anyway, let's move on here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Wait a minute. I just lost the page, so let me get this back here. Don't want to do that. Here, let me get it back here. Yeah. Evidently, we must be having some problems because I'm getting something from Mr. Roopdog. He says, Mr. Barber, your voice is much lower than Mr. Fuller's voice on today's broadcast. I know we have technicians back there working on that. That's one of those things that probably the usual suspects are in play. Now, I cannot prove that, but this is the only show where this seems to happen at, as I was speaking with Kahari last night about that. Evidently, they don't want Mr. Fuller's message to get out, but we're trying, Root Dog, to do the best that we can concerning that. Okay, T-Step, I'm going to get to you, but this is from, let me see here, not K, let's see here, because I wanted to get his ones first. Okay, here it is, Mr. Fuller. This is from Maurice. He said this, he said, Brother Bobby, I noticed over the weekend that a lot of older videos of Neely Fuller are not coming through. Now, that's not on the Talktainment Radio's site. That's on another site that I'm not going to mention. He said the videos of Neely Fuller have been set to private. Is there a reason for this? I don't know what other social mediums do or use, but I do know that Mr. Fuller's message is somebody is trying to prevent it from getting out. But you can go to talktainmentradio.com and get Mr. Fuller's the full context of whatever Mr. Fuller is discussing. Yeah, you can do that. Mr. Fuller, did you want to make a comment about that? Because you and I have talked about that certain things are to be expected from the usual suspects.
Well, when something is happening, the code position is when anything happens that shouldn't happen in the system of white supremacy, just logically speaking, it's the white supremacist's fault. Why? Because that's why it's called white supremacy. It's called supreme, meaning we're in charge not of some things, or not of half of the things or a quarter of the things. We're in charge of everything when it comes to people of color. We dominate everything that they do. They don't do anything without our permission or without our endorsement or that we didn't put together ourselves for them to do. So therefore, if anything happens that has anything to do with non-white people, according to compensatory counter-racist logic, then if it's something that shouldn't happen, it is the fault of the white supremacists. That's what supreme means. You're in charge of everything, not some things, not every now and then, in charge of everything all the time. So if something goes in error, if something happens anywhere that involves people of color, the presumption is, the logical presumption, the correct presumption is, it is the fault of the white supremacists. Why? Because they are running everything, every second, every minute. You don't breathe without their permission. We're in their prison, and the name of that prison, as prisoners of war, the black people of this planet, are prisoners of war, and the name of the prison, in capital letters, is the system of white supremacy.
Okay. All righty. Let's do this before we talk about your book. This is Gmail, and as a matter of fact, it is about reflection, and this is why this show is. It says, "Hello, Mr. Bobby. I'm not asking my reflection question to be part of your show, but I wanted Mr. Fuller to know how his codes have changed my life for the better since my husband introduced me to him about 4 years ago. In the past, I have dwelt with individuals, mostly close friends and family members, who made my life difficult by making simple things hard. Keeping their own word or general interactions were extremely difficult. I have benefited from various statements that Mr. Fuller has said, such as, here we go, quote, minimize contact to minimize conflict, end of quote. Stay in the question mode. Never ask for an apology, love, or respect. The only respect is self-respect, just to name a few, Mr. Bobby. I just wanted to express how these codes have decreased the conflicts in my life and have brought me more peace of mind. I am to the point now that I only interact with a few people outside my husband. These interactions are all constructive. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, for bringing us this information." Mr. Fuller?
Well, all I have to say is that that's the objective, that's the ultimate objective of codification. Even dealing with white people, non-white people, the ultimate objective is that every contact that you make with a person, you come away with that contact with a result that has been of very constructive value to you, to the other person, to everybody involved. Otherwise, these contacts should not exist. That's the logic. People have been on this planet for thousands of years, millions of years, and the contacts are terrible. Most of them have gotten to the place where most of us, where we glorify killing each other. We have parades. I mean, talking about how many people we kill. We won a war. Won a war? Stop and think about that. This is something to have a parade about? You won a war? What does that mean when you won a war? Well, we killed a lot of people. Well, stop and think about that. And this is what you're having a parade for? Flying flags and beating drums? And a lot of people carrying the same rifles that they carried when they killed someone? Destroyed something that the Creator made that you can't make? And you're having a parade about this? Everybody all lined up and dressed up and grinning and tooting horns and firing off something called fireworks. The person who the last thing they heard was a gunshot, that person doesn't want to hear any fireworks. That's the last sound that they heard before they fell, with blood gushing out of their mouths, and then they died on a battlefield. Do you think that they appreciate gunshots? No. Well, what's this parade about? See, we are absolutely sophisticatedly insane. All of us. And the white supremacists have fed this more than anybody and made it worse. I don't say they invented it, but I'm saying as long as it's been around, they just made this particular thing worse. When they should be saying, hey, we're going to change this world for the better. No more of these military parades and none of that. I mean, showing off military hardware. No, when you land your plane and come to visit the new people of this planet, when we visit each other, we're going to have our carpenters out there to greet you, our doctors out there to greet you, somebody who repairs something, somebody that does repair work, plumbers, bricklayers. We're going to have a fellow out there with a hard hat on. I mean, he's going to have his tape measure and whatnot. I mean, tape measure in one hand, he'll shake your hand with the other hand. Then he'll show you his tape measure, his new one, the new electronic tape measure that does a whole lot of calculations real fast. All right, and he's going to take his hand and put that in your hand and present that to you when you get off the plane, rather than somebody salute you because you killed somebody. This is a bunch of foolishness.
Yes, sir.
By people who are supposed to be super intelligent. But we are intelligent, but for the incorrect reasons.
Yes, sir.
Stop glorifying death.
Oh.
And start, if you're going to celebrate, making somebody alive.
Okay. Let's do this. TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go. Download the TalkTainmentRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and it is at this specific time, although we're 6 minutes late, that we have Mr. Fuller talk about his book. And it was mentioned in the very first segment today, at least the old book was. Mr. Fuller, talk about your book.
Yes, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. Because the concept of the entire work is that we're supposed to have the best government that we can possibly have on the entire planet and on any other planets we may be thinking about going to. The best possible government. And that government naturally would be a government of justice everywhere. And so justice would mean what? After we produce it, because we never have done that anywhere on the planet as far as I know, in all the history of the world. And that is guaranteeing that no person anywhere ever is mistreated. That's number one. And two, guaranteeing that every person who needs constructive help gets it. Every person, without exception. Otherwise, you can't have that thing called justice. Now, that takes some thinking, and that takes a whole lot of work and a whole lot of high-powered thinking, the best possible thinking that you can come up with to make those two guarantees, because no one has ever done it. But just because it never has been done, like at one time, no one had ever gone to the moon, just about everybody said it was impossible. But in less than a decade, has been celebrated now this year, 2019, they say that somebody thought of doing it and say, let's stop talking about it, let's do it. And they did it in less than 10 years, after millions of years of talking about it and singing songs about it and looking at it and trying to figure out what it is. So it's the same thing with this product called justice. Somebody once said, if you can conceive of something, if you can think about it, you probably can do it. Otherwise, you couldn't think about it. You couldn't even think about it. Now, maybe we need to think about that. If you can think about it, it can be done. Otherwise, you couldn't be able to think about it. That's the way the mind is supposed to be. The super mind, you might say. The correct mind among people. But this is what this book is about. But first of all, you have to get rid of racism in order to start talking about really being serious about having an entire world of justice. That's the first order of business. Why? Because racism interferes with everything of constructive value among the people of this planet. Right now, what is all the news about? It's about this person and that person probably being racist. And you say, okay, well, what has that got to do with anything? Well, it has to do with everything, because it gets in the way of economics, gets in the way of straightening out the education system. Mm-hmm. It gets in the way of, it makes a mess of entertainment.
Oh, yes.
All right. And then labor and law, religion, that color thing. I mean, somebody put something on their head or something and put something, to cover their hair. A lady might do that, and that lady has color in her skin, and all of a sudden religion is involved in the color business. All right? And somebody has a lot to say about that, and it goes back and forth, and you got heated arguments, and then you got killing going on. Okay? So you got to straighten out this mess about what color somebody is, and stop doing business on the basis of that, so we can go on to produce this thing called justice. And the textbook for victims of racism, the book that I have written, is supposed to help us along that journey. All right? But to get rid of racism is the first step. That should, because it interferes with everything else. I don't care what you start out to do.
Yes, sir.
You can get it by going to producejustice.com.
And that first book that Brother Sloan indicated, I believe it was my brother that indicated something about the digital design on there, which is the first book. You can still get that book, and that book is still relevant. Is that correct?
It is, but right now it's not at the website. I mean, I had a distribution problem. I got to figure out what that's all about. But it should be up and running in a couple of weeks again.
Now,
and also the Word Guide.
Yes,
it's
sir.
not available right now.
Okay.
But the basic book is by going to producejustice.com. That's the revised, expanded edition now.
Okay.
2016.
2016.
The original was 1984.
Right. That book there, the 1984 book, do you happen to know why that book seems to be gaining in popularity again? Because a lot of people really like that book.
I don't understand it. The first person to point this out to me was a person in French Guiana. And he told me, he said he wouldn't understand the revised expanded edition if he hadn't read the original edition. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to sell books and whatnot, which I am trying to sell books, but that's not my real objective. In fact, I said that I'm not going to put that book back up here. I have a revised, expanded edition, a 2016 edition, that covers just about everything that's in the original book. But the gentleman from Guyana, French Guiana, which is off the coast of what we call South America. He says, it's something about that book that it's just better written, and even the design and everything. And he mentioned the typewritten format being something he really appreciated.
Okay.
It's something about it, he said. I mean, it's easier reading and everything. And so, I don't know, but I take people's word for it.
Yes, sir.
If it works, that's the compensatory way.
Okay.
That's what compensation means.
All righty.
Whatever works best.
Let me close the first hour. Talktainmentradio.com, the world's greatest radio the way it should be heard. Thanks for listening to the first hour. Stay tuned for the second hour here on Talktainmentradio.com.
Thanks for listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters, why? One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You've got the power, the world's greatest radio. TalkTainmentRadio.com. Talktainment Radio, worldwide sound. TalkTainmentRadio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
Live call-in talk show. Dial 1-877-932-9766 and join the conversation here on TalkTainmentRadio.com.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
All righty. Welcome to the second hour of the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is Radio the Way It Should Be Heard, TalkTainmentRadio.com. Yeah, the way that radio is going to be heard. 1-877-932-9766 is the number that you can call, or you can Gmail me, as Anthony Sloan did from South Africa. Thank you for the correction for me, my brother, visiting here in the States. We were speaking about quote unquote, and he set the record straight for me anyway. So thank you again, and he just sent me another Gmail acknowledging that. Okay, so thank you for that. Our topic today is reflections. T-Step sent that in, and I mentioned that was a good topic that we would do, and as a matter of fact, we've been reflecting on words the whole program, and we did a program on the importance of words. And so we had Mr. Fuller and have Mr. Fuller addressing that. Again, the show is completely unrehearsed. I don't call Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller doesn't call me, and then we decide what we're going to talk about. We let it go right off the cuff, mistakes and all, because that's the way that life is. You just have to do it. So we do. With that being said, reflections is our topic today on the 24th of July. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, hopefully you can hear me. Matter of fact, somebody Gmail me if I'm coming in clearer now. But anyway, caller, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
You got me, brother.
Hey, how you doing, man? Go ahead.
Not good. A regular number I call in to your show. I can't get through. Have that been muted?
No, but as I had mentioned in the early extermination, man, we call that you affectionately, the usual suspects have been in play to try to distort Mr. Fuller's message, getting out and all kind of things. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Just all kind of things are going on. But we're glad you got through now. Go ahead, brother.
Oh, good. Now, very few of us want to hear or acknowledge genocide and extermination. Now, I do not call to talk away from this show or to take away from Brother Fuller wealth of knowledge. I call to add to the show by putting genocide and extermination on the table. Now, these psychopaths run Earth and they run space, and they've been running it for a long time. We have to come to some bottom conclusion. What is it that these psychopaths want since they run Earth and space? So I come to the conclusion they want to exterminate non-Caucasians from this planet. And if we look at their work, what they do, what they are doing today, then you can plainly see that, even if you don't want to acknowledge. My final comment is this. Mr. Hitler, Mr. Mussolini did not overthrow their government. The power structure in Germany and Italy put them in to do exactly what they did. Donald Hitler, Mussolini, Trump has not overthrown the power structure in this country. They put him in to do exactly what he's doing. He is supposed to create an atmosphere of chaos and things gone crazy. That's why you hear people say, man, he's crazy. You hear what he said? Man, he said this, he did that. He's supposed to do that. Because for them to exterminate us, they must have that type of atmosphere. For us to have a UN headquarters in New York, a black man is choked to death with 6 or 8 police around him, breathing for breath, and to have a UN headquarters right there in New York, and they don't say nothing, and nobody say nothing to them, what does that mean? Next final thing, if you can escape out of here, think seriously about getting out of here, getting your children out of here. You're not going to escape racism and white supremacy. They run the earth and space. But you might be able to get somewhere. Your grandchildren live their life out. They are psychopaths. They are mentally ill. Mm-hmm. But they are not the mental illness where a person don't know right from wrong. They know it's wrong to kill Trayvon. 300 police on Facebook in Philadelphia putting out racist comments. Police in uniform, in retired in Philadelphia. They know this wrong.
Yes, sir.
They must create an atmosphere for masses of black people.
All right, my brother.
Slaughtered.
I appreciate you calling in. We missed you, extermination man. Call back. All right, thanks. All right, Mr. Fuller. Let's see here from the Gmails. Let's see here. This comes from Yatora, and she says this, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, I'm sure I've read over this entire book, but I still would like to hear you, Mr. Fuller, break down on this question. Is it more or most constructive to focus one's time and energy on helping other black people to get on code, or to focus that energy on the system of white supremacy to end the mistreatment of black people?
Either way, it works. If you're focusing on talking, I guess, if you're talking to white people about replacing the system of racism with justice, that will work very well. I mean, because white people can make that decision very quick. They can just say, you know what, without black people doing anything, let's just get a better system than what we have been doing business on. We've been doing business on the basis of dominating and mistreating people based on color. That's a form of royalism. I mean, most efficient form that's ever been thought up. But it destroys people unnecessarily. We can have a system of justice, and we're intelligent enough to come up with ways and means of getting that done, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that people that need help the most get the most constructive help. And we can do that. We can do that. I mean, we have the technology and everything right here now. We don't have to search for that. We can just push a few buttons and get that well on the way. We can get that accelerated rather than just trying to figure out a way to refine the system of racism that we already have in place, because we have enjoyed that for a very long time. Mm-hmm. But we can enjoy having a system of justice. If white people make that decision, that will be done. And if you can persuade them, and I would like to, figure out a way to persuade them to do that, then it's a done deal. Like in 15 minutes, it's a done deal. They know how to do stuff. They get stuff done better than anybody on the planet. We have to admit that. White people, when they really roll up their sleeves and put their shoulder to the wheel, they get something done that's amazing in no time flat. And most black people would testify to that if we tell the truth. I mean, we're walking around bragging about products that they come up with. Hey, man, look at what I got. Look at this. I got the latest one. This costs $5,000. All right? And I got one of them. And talking about some form of communication right there in your hand. But he didn't invent it. He didn't have anything to do with it. I mean, he wouldn't know the first thing about how to repair it or do anything without a white person looking over his or her shoulder. Let's be honest and truthful about that. This is a complete mystery to us. Everything is. A washing machine is. Until what? Until somebody, white, comes up and says, hey, buddy, you want to know how to fix this washing machine? I made the washing machine. I know everything there is to know about a washing machine. You don't even know how to operate it without me telling you with your black self. But I can show you. So the point that I'm making is, they have been in business a long time, and we have been prisoners of war a long time. And as prisoners of war, they don't teach us anything. Mm-hmm. All right? So they know a whole lot more than we know. We have to admit that. That's why black people don't try to show off to white people, because we know that that's silly.
Yes.
That won't work. We show off to each other. Mm-hmm. But to get to the point, yes, we can ask white people to really work on this thing called justice and be very concise and very precise about what we mean by that. Not just abstractions like do the right thing and equality. Equal doing what? Killing people? We don't want to be equal to that. We want a better system altogether, and that would be a system of justice. Okay. And be very precise about that. Mm-hmm. Or you can go the route that I mostly go to, get black people to make all of our contacts constructive. That alone was the most dangerous thing that you can do to the system of white supremacy. Sometimes black people call and ask me, or they'll be talking to me or call in on this program. And I keep emphasizing that. Even before I went on air this morning, I was thinking about the contacts. That's the most poisonous thing. If we make every one of our contacts constructive, that will blow the system of white supremacy apart. I mean, big time.
Okay.
They can't resist that. There's no way. Oh. If we just concentrate and said, hey, I'm not contacting any other black person for the rest of my life unless I have a constructive reason for doing so. Period. It's got to be constructive. Yes, otherwise, I ain't doing it. Oh. I ain't talking to nobody or nothing.
Okay. Phone lines are open. 1-877-932-9766. And yes, the usual suspects are at play again, but phone lines are open. 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Okay, question from the Gmails, Mr. Fuller. It says this: good morning, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, on July the 10th, 2019, you were a guest on the Carl Nelson Show. You made a comment, I am paraphrasing, that you believe the U.S. is preparing to set up the country like Brazil and California. Can you provide your VGQ regarding this?
Oh, that's just something that's been floating around in my mind for years. I started thinking that way back in early 1970s, I think, or the late 1960s. And I said, California is sort of like an incubator for experimentation, particularly when it comes to matters of sex. Sex is very important. Sex is extremely powerful. It's the greatest motivating force among the people of the planet, next to the system of white supremacy itself. It motivates, everything is sexual, everything, but it's secondary to the system of white supremacy. System of white supremacy, in my opinion, is the most powerful motivating force among the people of the entire planet Earth, and sex is the second most powerful. So I started noticing, particularly around San Francisco and places like that, that the white supremacists were, engaging in new experimentation of everything sexual, all right? And then all during the 1960s, there was a lot of experimentation everywhere, all right? But it wasn't so much gender experimentation. It was just male with female doing all sorts of things with the porn magazines and all this. The Playboy Mansion. Everything sex, all during the 1960s. The miniskirts and all that. And people just sex. All kinds of books about sex. Sex started matching the books about murder mysteries, which that's a weird thing. You go into a bookstore, most of the books are about murdering somebody, or it's about engaging in various forms of sexual activity. That's what the books in there are about. How to run a locomotive, you go back to the back of the bookstore for that. Back there in the dustbin. How to grow asparagus, or how to put up a building and whatnot. You might find those books back there in a special section. But most of the books are going to be about killing somebody, war, murder, or it's going to be about sex. Women with their legs gapped open, sitting up in the middle of the window in the bookstore and whatnot. And so a lot of the 1960s was made up of that. But by the 1970s, they started saying, we need new sexualities. This thing about male and female, that's old-fashioned. We need to invigorate this thing. We need to pump it up, all right? And say, well, pump it up by doing what? Well, we need some people who male with male. And not only that, we need different varieties of that. Not just one variety, not just male with a male. We've always had plenty of that. That's kind of old hat. Everybody understands that. Or a female with a female. But we need to break that down into, little bits and pieces of this and that and the other. Well, like what? Well, we need to come up with something called trans. Well, trans what? Well, it might mean anything. Trans this, trans that. Maybe 15, 20, 30, 40 different types of transsexuality. Well, what does that mean? And is it an improvement over what we have had before? Oh, it'll be a great improvement. Well, improvement how? What is it improving? Oh, well, it's part of the liberation package. Well, what do you mean by liberation package? Well, you figure that out as we go along. And so they were doing this mostly in Northern California at the time, all right, and started jumping all over people who would question it.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, backlash real quick. They say you're homo explaining exactly what that means. All right? I looked it up in the dictionary, homophobic, they say being afraid of someone who is homosexual. Well, let's break that down. Afraid how? What are you doing to show fear? Say, well, a lot of people kill people. In some parts of the world, it's legal to kill them. Adolf Hitler was doing it and whatnot. And say, no, well, you don't want nobody killing nobody and all like that. But now, what, are there any other types of fear? Well, yeah, there are other types of fear. Well, other types of fear that make people do what? Well, just fear. Just fear in the abstract.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wait a minute. No, we need some details here. We're going to make all these wonderful changes that you're talking about. So, in answer to the question, I started noticing it. It was mostly happening in Northern California and then spread to Southern California and then started spreading everywhere.
Yes.
And then I understand that it was a huge drumbeat at that same time in a place called Brazil for the same thing. Now I understand that a lot of people who are in Brazil are beginning to say, wait a minute, who thought all this up? Particularly among us, all us dark-skinned people. Where is this coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And is it an improvement? Now, I understand Brazil, particularly at Mardi Gras time, had always been what you call a real what you call liberated, as far back as anybody can remember, when it came to naked women and all this type of thing parading in the street.
Yes, sir.
But this thing called, trans this and trans that, and we need about 40 or 50 different types of sexuality among people to improve ourselves, then I start saying, wait a minute. And a lot of this, it seems like they are putting the black people right in the forefront of it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I really became suspicious of it then.
Okay.
When it was all white people, I wasn't paying much attention. But when they start putting black people in the front of it, I say, this is a white supremacist thing.
Okay.
And that's the conclusion I've come to right to this day.
Yes, sir. Okay, talktainmentradio.com is a 24/7, no-charge, worldwide broadcasting facility with hosts delivering on various topics such as news. How about that one? Lifestyle. Woo! Sports, law, health, wellness, religion, and politics. And here's a few that I'm going to share with you. Everlasting Life with Michelle Vanal. This show right here with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and Mr. Bobby as co-host, The Compensatory Concept, and All in the Family with S. Yolanda Robinson. Now listen, again, all these shows are exclusive to TalkTainmentRadio.com. All you have to do is go on the TalkTainment.com radio homepage, and man, you're right there. Just click on a couple of programs, sample it, see how you like it. And if you do, maybe you can like and subscribe to it. That's totally up to you, but sample it. All this from TalkTainmentRadio.com, radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby. I am the co-host on the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And before I take the phone call, Mr. Fuller, you spoke about the word trans. I was in a meeting last night, and that word came up along with a couple other things that you've hit on. And now it's up to 500 different types of expressions of sexuality. And I didn't know that it began out in California. Wow. All right, let's take a phone call. Caller, you're on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Go ahead.
I wanted to say that sexual remark that he stated is so true, because I know me, myself, that's what I kind of always am thinking about, and I have to check myself on that. I want to thank Mr. Fuller for mentioning that in his book. Another thing I wanted to say is that since the system of white supremacy is always restructuring, do you think that the code needs to be updated and restructured as well that was placed in the book?
What was that question?
It says, you constantly mention that the system is a 24-hour system and it's always retweaking and restructuring. And do you think that the book itself needs to be going through restructuring as white supremacy keeps changing and restructuring itself?
Oh, yes. That's why as I become aware of things, because the white supremacists are always coming up with something, some refined way of practicing white supremacy. Once you get something started, you keep trying to improve it. That's whether you're making an airplane or a motor car or a lawnmower or a telephone. I mean, improvements have been made. So the white supremacists understand that universal principle. Once you get something going, you start looking at it and double-checking it and whatnot and say, I wonder if I can improve this. So the white supremacists are always trying to improve on the system of white supremacy to make it what? More powerful, more refined, more smooth in its operations. It used to be they just walked around all day, or rode around all day looking for a black person to lynch in order to keep them in place. Now and then, they will kill a black person here and there. Mostly they got black people killing each other. That's a part of the smooth operation. Hey, somebody figured out some time ago. Why not just put them in a frame of mind where they have hostility toward each other and plant that seed in the schools and everywhere else where they become rebellious against the teacher and whatnot because the teacher is not teaching anything that they think they can use. And then next thing you know, that spills into the streets, and then they carry it into the streets, and then they start glorifying it in their songs and whatnot, mistreating each other, and get them to doing that and cutting each other up on Saturday night like they did in the Northwestern Hemisphere and other places. In the old days, they used knives and razors. I mean, just regular ritual. Black people go out, get drunk, start a fight, and kill each other on Saturday night. And then back to the mines, back to the plantations, back to the farms and whatnot, back to the factories on Monday, okay? And a lot of songs reflected that. And actually, some of them kind of urged it on, like this is part of black culture. That's what we do. Saturday night is get drunk and kill each other night, okay? And then go to church on Sunday morning and ask for forgiveness. And then back under the slave master's job on Monday. That was the sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And so the white supremacists thought of doing all this. Why? Because, hey, they don't let anything happen that they're not orchestrating one way or another or steering it. That's the way the system, the prison system of white supremacy works.
Yes.
So that's just it. They refine it as they go along.
Okay.
So if that answers the question, I hope that it does, and if it doesn't...
No, it answers the question. There are a couple of questions I could ask in that, but I think as a whole it did. So I should be expecting a volume 3 from you.
No.
I would think.
No, I'm going to say this about the books. Now, I told people, one problem, one book. And I like to think of the revised expanded edition of the basic textbook. And if you see at the bottom of the word guide, it says an addition to the basic textbook. I wanted to put all 800 of those pages in one volume.
Couldn't do it,
but that would have been kind of cumbersome for people to carry around. So I say I'm just going to split up the word guide, all right, because a person can just use that every now and then and leave that, and they can carry around with them basically the basic book, and that will cover most of the things they have to say. And if they have to look up a certain word within the compensatory counter-racist context, according to what I have written, then they can look at that later. And they won't have to, because I wanted a book that can be carried around by people. All the time. And, on the job and whatnot. And even in classrooms, people said, well, don't we need special schools for this and all that? I said, no, you become the school. You're a walking school. And if you're in a classroom, you just take the book with you. And they're teaching sociology or psychology or whatever, or anything dealing with people, economics. You just have the textbook in the classroom with you. I say, and when you start talking out of the textbook, that's a part of the class. You don't need to set up any special schools.
Okay.
That's the compensatory way. You use what is already there.
Okay.
Wherever you happen to be, you're the school.
Okay, my brother, you're on the line. Go ahead with your second question for Mr. Fuller.
All right, so this is Bill in New York again, and I just wanted to say that we're reflecting on what the brother said from Africa between open and closed quotes. I think you can say it if you're speaking open quote, closed quote, in my opinion. I just wanted to bring that out.
Okay.
Really, you're stating the beginning and the ending of what someone has said.
Okay.
I have no problem with saying open quotes or closed quotes. The next question I wanted to ask Mr. Fuller is, I want to just say to him, please do a little bit of research on ADOS, because I know it's been mentioned many times, and he said he has not been up on that. So I just want him, because I think a lot of questions I would like to ask, or people want to ask us about that. But this question is, why isn't money the most dominant religion that uses white supremacy, racism, as a tool to control all wealth, as stated by, like, Myron Fagan? That's my question.
Oh, if I understand the question, why isn't money
the most dominant religion instead of white supremacy, racism? Why is it money? Because people say that it's not racism, Bill. It's money. So why is it money the most dominant religion that uses white racism as a tool to control all wealth?
Oh, well, you used the correct word there. Money is a tool. Racism is a religious philosophy that's also a tool, but it is a superior philosophy to money. Nothing is money. You can say that a rock is money. A diamond is a rock. A shiny rock. Mm-hmm. And they make it shiny, because I understand that diamonds in the rough are not very shiny. I don't know whether that's true or not. But even if they did or didn't shine, what is money? Money is whatever the white supremacists say that it is. That's why the white supremacist philosophy is superior to money, because money doesn't make the white supremacists. The white supremacists make money. I worked in a place called the Bureau of Engraving and Printing for many years, and they printed something called money on paper. It was blank paper, and then when they ran it through a press, it came out being money. And it had $10 on it, $20, $50, $100, sometimes called Benjamins, because it had Benjamin Franklin's name on it, whatnot. And George Washington, #1, the $1 bill, a slave owner. Thomas Jefferson, a $2 bill, a slave owner. So they have slave owners' pictures on money. So what's superior, the money or the person that owns the money, the person who makes the money, the person whose pictures go on the money? So if I make something, I'm superior to the thing that I made. So the money is not controlling me. I'm controlling the money because I made the money. That's obvious. And so that's where I got that from. I say that the system of white supremacy is the strongest religion in the world, because what is a religion? A religion is a strong belief backed up by action. And nobody has ever come up with a philosophy stronger than the system of white supremacy and put it into action.
Okay.
Other people are running trying to catch up. They'll say, well, I have a religion, but I'm having problems trying to practice my religion because people keep interfering with my religion, and my religion is at a disadvantage. And I'm say, for example, I'm a Christian, but people are always opposing me as a Christian, and it's a real struggle trying to keep this Christianity thing going, and I'm having problems trying to get people to follow the Christian religion, and they are being persecuted. Well, the white supremacists don't have that problem because ain't nobody persecuting them. I mean, hey, they don't take no guff from nobody. Mm-hmm. I don't care what your religion is, your philosophy, or how much money you got if you're black. the white supremacists said, hey, you ain't seen money like me. I'm a white person in the system of white supremacy, and I am money. I'm walking money. Any money that you have doesn't mean anything until I say so with your black self. That's why the code says the system of white supremacy is the most powerful religion ever thought up in the minds of the people of this planet. I don't know about other planets, but on this planet, they prove it every minute of every day.
Every day. All righty. Let's see here before we do. Okay. Caller, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Fuller. I'd just like to say, you're totally correct about everything you're saying. I'm seeing it. I'm observing it. It's pretty much right in our faces. I was listening to an older show back in 2013. A young man asked you to look at a documentary called "We Come as Friends," and it went into the effect of China over in Africa with the white supremacists, and it pretty much just validates everything you say. That's all I can really say. I'm just listening, and everything you're saying is really true in my eyes. That's all I gotta say.
All right, brother. We thank you for that VGQ, and thank you for listening, my brother. Very much. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Fuller, let's do this. TalkTameAtRadio.com. We go where you go. Download. Do people still do that today? Download the TalkTameAtRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. Thank you for listening, brother. Sound like you were driving, but thank you for listening. My name is Mr. Bobby, the co-host on the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I'm listening to him myself. But it is at this particular time that we designate for Mr. Fuller to discuss his book, and I have both copies right here. And Mr. Fuller, go ahead and talk about your book.
Yes, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And right now, the Word Guide and the original 1984 edition might not be available. That should be available within the next 3 weeks, someone has told me. I hope that's correct, because there are people who are asking for those books. And right now, you will get the revised expanded edition of the 1984 edition. That's the latest edition, and the only main edition, by going to producejustice.com. That's the 2016 edition. And what will come up on the screen is the method for ordering, and a little description, just a brief description of what the book is about and what it's for. And the book is directed to the individual person of color, non-white person, here on planet Earth in 2019, who perceives him or herself to be a victim of the system of white supremacy. And it gives an analysis, according to my opinion, of what racism is and the effects that it has, and what an individual person, a series of suggestions about what an individual person can do each and every day without having to check with somebody else or go to a committee meeting or anything like that. You have problems every day, most likely, directly, indirectly, if you're a person of color on planet Earth in 2019. And the problem is people will mistreat you because of your color. That's like a domain. That's like something that has to be. That's just a given in the system of white supremacy. That's what it's for. It's set up to dominate and mistreat people who have color in their skin. So we needed, in my opinion, a book that will address that for the individual. And when the individual is acting alone or speaking alone or in a lonely situation, what do you do? What do you say? Because everything is about what you do and what you say. In reaction to what? In reaction to what somebody else does and what somebody else is saying. And that includes people that look like you and people that don't. What's the best thing to do in every circumstance? That's the book that I tried to write. What is the best thing to do and or say in every circumstance? And naturally, it's all kinds of circumstances that just go on and on and on. Circumstances by the millions. So I couldn't put everything in a book, but I try to use it as a basic guide. What do you do when somebody says this to you? What do you say? What is the best possible thing can ever be said by anybody at any time in response to what that person just said to you? That's the kind of book I tried to write.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay. All righty.
ProduceJustice.com. That's how you get it.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to the Gmails. Let's see here. This is from Brother Rashad. He says this. Hello, Mr. Bobby. I really appreciate the discussions you hold with Mr. Fuller. He often mentions old school movies having a lot of valuable constructive information. I have been taking his advice and watching a lot of the old school Hollywood films. Can you ask Mr. Fuller if he ever watched the film 20,000 Years in Sing Sing? There is a lot of constructive information for victims of white supremacy in the film based on a book written by a former Sing Sing warden named Laws, Laws. Then he gave a link to the online film. Mr. Fuller, have you watched the movie 20,000 Years in Sing Sing?
No, I haven't.
Have you heard of it?
I heard about the movie when it first came out many years ago, but I never bothered to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should.
Well, you got a lot of backup stuff to do, don't you, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, in fact, I have books on my shelf that I am intending to get to for about 15 or 20 years. I mean, and I haven't gotten to not one page of any of them, and more are still coming.
Yes.
So I'll never be able to do a lot of things that I want to do. But I try to do the best I can with the little time that I have.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I'm getting that too.
But anything that anybody can get out of anything, look. See, the whole premise is if you're looking at a movie or reading a book, try to figure out, is there anything in here of constructive value that I can use? In other words, short term, focus. What is the lesson that I can get out of looking at this particular movie? Or looking at a picture on the wall. You know, you pass by a picture in a museum, and you say, okay, I'm looking at this picture on the wall. It's taking up the whole wall. Now, is there a lesson? This is called modern art. Now, what lesson, when I walk away from having looked at this picture or took a picture of the picture, what lesson can I get out of having seen this work of modern art on this wall today? What can I walk away with that I can put in a practical manner? I can actually use it. Use it to do what? Use it as a lesson. A lesson for what? Usually when you're trying to get a lesson in something, it's to do what? According to logic. Solve a problem.
Solve a problem, yes.
So when you look at if you're looking at a statue of a person in a town square, you say, okay, I'm looking at this statue. Now, when I walk away from this statue and think about this statue, what will I have learned from having looked at this statue of this person that I can use to do what? Solve one of my problems that I have right now.
Okay.
Now, that is how you should look at the entire world. I don't care if you're just looking at a leaf on a tree. You know, you might say, well, hey, that leaf on that tree made me think about leaves on trees.
Okay.
And yeah, and that is very pleasant to me, because how does a leaf work? I see leaves come on trees, and then in the fall they drop off. But then it seems like the same leaf appears next year. Now, what lesson can I learn from that? See, just a leaf on a tree.
Yes, sir.
You're supposed to learn something from everything that you see.
Everything. Okay. Let's do this. Okay, caller, you are on with Mr. Fuller in our remaining minutes. Be brief. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. My name is Gregory, and Mr. Fuller, I have a question. I realized, like, in my family, I had a lot of incest that happened with the rape and things like that, and I know that that's something that happens also in jail culture, a lot of rape, and I was just wondering if you could maybe describe or contemplate the effects of that, and also how that can play into homosexuality, and how it's something that's not discussed in our community and us as people in general.
You have a lot of what?
Incest?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, like uncles raping cousins and stuff like that, yes.
Yes. So it comes down to this one question, always in anything. And what is that question? Is this constructive? Now, I'm looking at a boy having sexual intercourse with his sister. So they call that incest. So you stand back and you look at that. And you say, now, okay, I got to make a decision. I got to make an assessment about this. And what is it? According to compensatory logic, everything falls into one of two categories: constructive, non-constructive. There's no such thing as in between. And according to most historians and most doctors and scientists, they have said that down through the years, whenever people have done that, sometimes they produce offspring, meaning babies. And they have found that, oh, yes, you can do that. And that's what you might call family togetherness and all that. You can put it on any kind of label. But what is the result of it? Is it constructive or non-constructive? And a long time ago, probably millions of years ago, I mean, people in caves and whatnot, and people who are extremely primitive, they don't do that because they found out what? You come up with a whole bunch of people, sometimes that don't have arms. They're babies born who they have brain defects. Oh, so you have sexual intercourse with your sister, if you're a male, and that sister has a baby. It may turn out okay, but then on too many cases, no. You got something that you got to take care of now for the rest of your life, maybe 2 or 3 creatures. You can't really call them functioning people. And so they're just walking around, I mean, you know, with one arm or with a half a brain or with one eye, I mean, down near the corner of the mouth and the other eye at the top of the head. And it's not functional. This is not a functional creature. I mean, you know, one eye that doesn't work right now down near the corner of the mouth and another eye at the top of the head. I mean, they can only see, it's a good eye, but it can see straight up. It don't even move. I mean, now, this is not what the Creator probably had in mind. So you don't commit incest. And you give these very practical reasons. Doesn't have anything to do with what anybody thinks or what the law says or nothing like that. Just say, hey, this is not the best arrangement. You know, because right now the white supremacists are just dumping all kinds of stuff on black people and saying, these are wonderful arrangements. I mean, this sexual sabotage, I mean, this is all over the place. And that's what I call it. I mean, it's a number of names I've come up with for, but recently I used the term sexual sabotage because that's what it is. We're in a war.
Do you think incest has played a part in that?
If that's what they're encouraging, because they're going to get around to doing that too. And we have already been there, done that. Like you were saying, some people are doing it now and always have done it. But it is not a healthy thing to do. Every move that you make should be an improvement over movements that you made yesterday. I don't know who originated that. I didn't originate that, but it makes a whole lot of sense. Every move that you make today should be an improvement over any move that you made yesterday.
Yeah.
Now, suppose we had a world like that among black people. Suppose black people thought that way. You know what? I spent the whole day doing this and that and going here and going there, and there's a lot of stuff I did, but it wasn't no better than the stuff I did yesterday. Now, suppose every black person say, hey, I give myself some terrible marks for that, because every day that I breathe, I'm supposed to be doing something better than everything that I did yesterday.
Well,
we would be we would be people who would be off the hook.
Gotta leave it
like that.
Okay, gotta leave it there, caller. Gotta leave it there, Mr. Fuller. Talk to him at radio.com. The world's greatest radio the way it should be heard. Good discussion, people. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for inviting.
Thanks for listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You've got the power, the world's greatest radio, TalkTainmentRadio.com.